Hi everyone. A quick comment before the episode starts. To keep making these episodes, we need your support. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel and share with your friends. Every subscription helps. If you're listening on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or any other podcast platform, please give us a rating and leave a review. Your feedback is really important because it keeps us going. Thank you and enjoy today's episode. A listener note, this episode contains explicit language and descriptions of sexual assault. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, I'd like to think consent is when you say, can I? And I say, yes or no. And then it's supposed to end there. But you know, some people, they just assume that maybe you don't know what you're trying to say. Do you know that I just had a recent, something happened recently with me and my friend. We went out with this guy.
Bro, women are built confused. Nothing confuses me about knocking. Like, I'm straightforward, like every other man is. But the thing is, some girls don't know what they want. Or rather, they do know what they want, yeah, but they don't state it.
We've been telling this guy, no. Like, is it that we don't know what we are saying or we don't know what we want?
So from the beginning, they probably know that they don't want to have sex with you, but then they want you to, you know, talk like a guy, basically. They want you to, I don't know, convince them or persuade them, I guess, you know, and then you have to persuade, and a lot of persuasion. And
that's like he has been pestering us, we should go out, all this stuff now. So we went out with him and then...
And they probably knew from the beginning if you were going to or not. So why not just make it easy and say, look, this is not going to happen.
So we went, so while we were going now, he was just trying to convince us. So why are we always hurrying to go home? What's home? We should just hang out more. He was like, okay, he'll just take us to his house and then he'll leave the bedroom for us. We will sleep in the bedroom while he can just sleep in the parlor or in the next room. We're like, no, we want to go home. I told him I had work the next day. I needed to. And he was like, he's going to bring us back home as early as possible. We're like, please, just take us home.
But then, yeah, they tried to beat around the bush.
I don't understand. We've been telling this guy, no. Like, is it that we don't know what we are saying or we don't know what we want? Like, he's just expecting us to just sit down and just like not move, not do anything. So some people are just like that, especially guys. Like, you keep telling somebody no, and they'll just be treating your no as if you don't know what you're saying, as if you don't know.
And then some guys just don't have patience for all of that. And that's where we have problems like rape and all those stuff, because
this kind of thing has led to many rape cases. Way too many. And at the end, they will be blaming the lady. They'll be like, why did you go out in the first place? Why did you go to his house in the first place? Did you know this is what he wants? Blah, 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 blah.
From Triple E Media, I'm Rahmat Muhammad, and this is The Backstory. Today on The Backstory, we break down consent. What is it? How do you give it? And why is it important?
In early May of this year, a video was released on the Instagram page of Punch newspapers. Now, the video was removed the same day it was posted, but we had a chance to view it before it was removed.
In the video, we could see what looks like a living room with a couch. On the couch were two people. Sitting on the left was a very popular actor. He goes by the name Babajisha, but his full name is Olariwaju Omeyinka. He's sitting comfortably, sprawled out, the typical man spread type of sitting. Then, on the very opposite end of the couch was a young lady. Now, the young lady's upper body and face were covered by a video sensor to protect her identity because she's a minor. She's only 14 years old. She was wearing a knee-length dress and we could see her legs.
As the video proceeds, we could see Babajisha stretch out his right hand to touch her buttocks. She doesn't seem to respond. Then his next move is to reach out to draw her closer, and he appears to pull her upper body over to him, but her legs stay on the other side, and she pulls away.
Some minutes after she pulled away, he reaches his right hand to touch her legs. She hasn't moved this whole time. She's still way over to the other side. She doesn't appear to be responding, so he stops touching her legs. But then, a few minutes later, he uses his right hand to reach for her left hand. He takes her left hand. She doesn't offer it to him. And in fact, her elbow is still tucked close to her body. So he has to get closer in order to do what he does next.
He takes the girl's finger, it looks like her index finger, and he puts it in his mouth and proceeds to suck on it for about 30 seconds. This whole time, her elbow is still tucked in close to her body, and she's still fixed to the right side of the couch. Over the next few minutes, he fondles her legs and other parts of her body through her dress, and this whole time she's unresponsive.
At some point, he moves from the left side of the couch to sit closer to her on the right side, and he proceeds to again pull her upper body close to him. Mind you, her legs are still reaching toward the right side of the couch away from him.
So now, as he has her upper body trapped, we can't see what he's doing because her face is covered by the video sensor, but we can see her legs are kicking behind her. Literally, the girl is trying to get away, and she finally manages to pull away.
Now, after the video came out, which clearly shows Babajisha, a grown man making advances toward an unwilling female child, the reactions started to pour in. A few people came out to defend him. For example, one actress, Buki Black, said she knows him and he's not capable of doing what he's accused of. Other people like Babajisha's friend, Yomi Fabi, started to imply that the CCTV footage was a setup and that they were trying to trap Babajisha.
But others like actress Iwodi insisted that there is absolutely no excuse for this type of behavior.
Clearly, what happened in that video was not consensual. The young lady was assaulted.
That's Barrister Rabia Hadejia, our legal analyst.
And there's a section in Nigeria's criminal code, section 252, that defines assault as when a person strikes, touches, or moves, or otherwise applies force to another person without their consent.
The minimum punishment for assault is 1 year in prison, but it could go up to 14 years, depending on the circumstances.
Now, even though the criminal code does not explicitly define what consent is, Section 252 does indicate that consent obtained through fraud is not consent. We have other laws and cases that give us hints about what the law means by consent. For example, under our rape laws, consent obtained by force or by means of threats or intimidation of any kind or by fear of harm is not consent. These rape laws also suggest that consent given by a child is not consent. In some laws, a child is defined as 14 years old. Others put it at 16. So the law recognizes that there is a certain age in life when we are not capable of truly consenting to sexual acts.
And in 2019, Nigeria's Senate passed a sexual harassment bill, which actually recognizes power dynamics in giving consent.
This sexual harassment bill is specific to the interactions between students or prospective students of tertiary institutions and the staff of those institutions. Courts no longer consider consent when it comes to student-teacher relationships.
And then there are cases that set precedents about how our courts think about consent.
In the case of Ahamefule and Imperial Medical Center, consent was defined by the court as a voluntary agreement which is the deliberate and free act of the mind. Now, even though Nigerian laws do not have a specific definition of consent, if we put all of these other laws and case law together, consent is an agreement that is freely given without fear. And consent is informed, meaning that the person has the fact at the time they consent. If there is fraud, there's no consent. And the person must be of an age and mental capability when they do give this consent.
The specific actions of Babajisha on the young lady in that video should be a fairly straightforward case of assault or defilement. And the Lagos state government has charged him with multiple counts, including sexual assault, defilement of a child, and indecent treatment of a child.
But then you have cases that are not so black and white, like the case of Sansa and Tiffa, which went viral in 2020. Tiffa and Sansa were once a popular social media couple in their early 20s who flaunted their love on Twitter. They would post all kinds of cheesy pictures together. In one post, Sansa says to Tiffa, "Promise you'll grow old with me," and he completes it by replying, "And ride with me until the sun goes down." So really cheesy, and they had a huge following.
But all that changed when they broke up. We still don't know why they broke up, but it wasn't a friendly breakup. After the breakup, rumors started that Sansa had cheated on Tiffa, and so he broke up with her. At some point, Sansa's nude photos were leaked on the internet, and she had to involve her family and legal authorities to take it down. After this, Sansa made a long Twitter thread, which she basically said she never cheated on Tiffa. She also said she was the one who broke up with him because she couldn't take the different forms of abuse she had to endure in the relationship. And on the list of abuse, she added rape.
The situation immediately went from a relationship gone bad to a rape accusation. In response to the accusation, Tiffa said he had no reason to rape Sansa when she was the one that helped him put on the condom. He said that even after the incident that Sansa was referring to as rape, they were still dating and hanging out. So why would she call it rape now that they had broken up? Tiffa then released screenshots of a WhatsApp conversation between him and Sansa, which he claimed was proof that their sexual relations had been consensual. And what you're going to hear now is a reenactment of that WhatsApp conversation.
"You still haven't apologized for that night we had sex, even when I was crying in pain. And I spoke to you afterwards and I told you how much it hurt me."
So I didn't apologize that night?
No, you said no word after I finished speaking. We just went to bed, swept it under the rug.
Wow, I really can't remember. Maybe because you said I raped you.
There are so many things we've been trying to walk over. I felt that way. I was in pain. I let you know I was. Told you several times to stop. I even started crying, but you never did. No, I didn't push you away. I didn't fight you off. I didn't scream. Because you are my boyfriend and I felt bad. Felt bad that you needed to come so badly and I'd be selfish.
You could have pushed me.
So even though I was acting badly, I kept quiet and I let you continue.
You don't talk when we have sex and it hurts. You don't speak up.
So until I push you, I don't talk?
But after you came to tell me it hurt, how did you expect me to know?
I was fucking crying.
I don't live in your head.
I kept telling you I am sore.
Really?
I am sore.
You weren't.
Tiffa, no, I am sore. I was.
Okay, I agree. I didn't listen to you.
Why were you asking me what's wrong after you finished? Why did you keep saying sorry while we were stroking?
Because you were moody. Your facial expression.
Now, after the chat was released, the Twitter community began to debate the issue. And people had so many questions.
Did she have a right to ask him to stop, even when she had agreed to have sex and even helped him to put on the condom?
If she eventually went quiet and let him continue, does it still count as rape?
If they've had consensual sex before, can it count as rape?
If they continued dating afterwards and probably had sex, does it count as rape?
Does crying equal rape?
What does the law say about consent and the withdrawal of consent?
How many times did she have to say stop to be taken seriously?
We all know the F word for sex, but do you know that there are 3 F words that should never take place in sexual contact. And those 3 F words are force, fear, and fraud.
That's Joyce Short, and she runs the Consent Awareness Network, which is a global organization based in the US. Their mission is to apply the definition of consent into laws.
So if you look at the definition for consent, freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement, you can easily understand that you can't use force, you can't create fear, you can't influence the person with fraud. If you applied those 3 tenets to theft, right, no one should be able to use force, fear, or fraud to obtain your property. So why is it that we don't recognize that you can't use force, fear, or fraud to obtain sexual contact with a person either?
The organization has developed a definition of consent as freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement.
If you understand the concept of freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement, then you understand freely given, can't use force, can't use fear, knowledgeable and informed. You can't use fraud. You can't defraud a person and trick them into sexual contact.
But some people enhance their resumes when they are looking to date someone. Maybe he says he's an auto parts dealer rather than a mechanic. Or maybe she says she doesn't have children when she does. Is that considered as fraud?
Well, we all lie by commission or omission when we first start dating someone. That's true.
There's nothing wrong with attracting a mate by lying. There is something very wrong with having having sexual contact with a person by lying. So let's distinguish when you cross the line, right? If you're simply writing this in your profile and you've attracted this person using fraud, you are doing something that is immoral but not illegal.
But according to Joyce, we still have a responsibility to tell the truth before committing sexually to another person.
When you're attracting a person, if you want to build up your story, that's fine, but have the respect for that person's reproductive system, that you don't engage them and engage their reproductive system unless they actually are consenting, freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement.
Also, the burden to be informed lies with both parties.
When you fail to correct the information that you know that person is relying on, and that person has a reasonable basis for believing your deception, and that's really the criteria. Does the person have a reasonable basis for believing the deception? If you tell that person, I own a Maserati, and the only wheels that you own are a bicycle, did you look at the Maserati? Did you see the person driving the Maserati? Did you do anything to cure the information that you received? Or did you have a reasonable basis for believing the deception? The offender knows whether they're using a malicious influence in order to get you to cooperate or comply. And it's the influence of the offender that determines whether or not you've consented. And as soon as you say no, or if as soon as the person is forcing you or coercing you or tricking you, then you're no longer consenting.
And just like we say that consent must be an enthusiastic yes, withdrawing consent has to be a firm and committed no.
And if they agree, they can always withdraw that agreement at the moment of action.
At the time of occurrence, you can withdraw your consent.
It's also important that the person who gave consent cannot go backwards and then withdraw consent for something that has already happened. So let's say you consent at that moment of action. Then 2 weeks later, you break up. You can't just go back and say you did not consent. So now, if we look at Sansa and Tiffa's situation, using freely given, knowledgeable and informed arguments, did Sansa consent at the time of the particular sexual interaction in question?
The answer is no, based on the WhatsApp messages. She said she was telling him to stop, and he even agreed that he didn't listen to her.
Okay. Rabia, but does this rise to the level of rape according to our criminal code?
Anthonieta, the thing about the courts is they don't look at individual laws and events in isolation. The event in question happened in the context of a relationship that existed before the alleged incident. And I believed it continued to exist even after the alleged incident, right?
Yes. According to Tiffa, it did.
If this event happened once and it was between strangers, there would be no doubt that it was rape. Or if one of them was underage, then it's also clear. But here, you have two adults, both in their early 20s, who have a pre-existing relationship. Sansa clearly felt something was off about that interaction. Even though she was his girlfriend at the time and had consented to prior sexual interaction, according to the WhatsApp chat, she didn't consent to that particular one. And Tiffa didn't stop when she asked him to stop. What he did was not only wrong, but it was also immoral and sleazy. But it's not clear if the courts in Nigeria at this moment in time would recognize this as a criminal case. Especially because Sansa realized in the moment that she had options. She could have pushed him off, but she didn't. She wanted to make him happy. And that says more about our social upbringing than our laws.
Hi everyone. Before I get to my closing comments, I want to thank all the young people who gave us feedback for this episode. And I want to play a few more clips from some of that feedback.
Consent. What does consent mean to me? Consent means permission, approval, It basically means approval to me.
When it comes to consent, there are no bloodlines. It is either it's a yes or a no. There is nothing like, I don't know. Let me think about it. Consent comes from a place of enthusiasm. There has to be an active yes.
Sometimes you don't need to ask for you to be given consent, permission that is. Sometimes you do something and if the person does not disapprove, then yeah, to me, you've given me consent. But if you do disapprove while I'm in a state of doing it, then that is, you have told me that you do not consent or you've not given me permission.
But I can understand how some people mistake signs, body language, kindness as consent.
Now, what struck me about each of those respondents is that they put emphasis on consent as being approval, permission, and the enthusiastic yes. Now, I have a problem with that. From the 2 case studies we discussed, and there are so many more like them, the problem in Nigeria is not the enthusiastic yes. The problem is in giving and accepting the firm and committed no. As a neuroscientist, I can tell you that our brain is trained to look for the things that we tell it to look for. So if we tell it to be on the lookout for an enthusiastic yes, then those are the signs that we will pay attention to. And even if we see signs that are not enthusiastic, our brain will find a way to interpret them as yes. And we will subconsciously ignore what could be very obvious signs of no. Now, I commend the consent awareness movement, and I think it's needed. But there needs to be more emphasis on teaching young people how to give and receive firm and committed no's. And I completely appreciate why saying and receiving no is a much more difficult thing to do. As human beings, we are social creatures, which means that we need to get along with each other in order to survive, and that means being accommodating. From a young age, we're taught to be nice. When we say no, we don't want to share that toy, we're told that we have to share. We have to be nice, even when we don't want to be. This is true for all children and doubly so for girls. My parents raised 5 girls before my brother came along. My dad and I didn't play football, but instead we had debates around the dinner table. And I didn't realize it at the time, but those debates, they shaped my ability to say no. No, Dad, that doesn't sound right to me because of X, Y, and Z. No, Dad, I think you're wrong. No, Dad, I disagree. So growing up, disagreement was something that my dad taught me how to do. And because I was able to disagree with him, my dad, the highest authority in the house, well, the second highest authority compared to Mom. Don't even try to disagree with Mom. But getting comfortable disagreeing with my dad got me ready to disagree with anyone and anything that didn't feel right. I could say no. That doesn't mean it's easy to say no, but when I have to do it, I can. So, is it important to teach children to share? Of course. Sharing is critical to social survival, but another critical skill is saying no. Now, the other side of saying no is receiving no, accepting rejection. And while Dad taught me how to say no, my mom taught me how to accept rejection, and she did it in the most stereotypical African way. She yelled. So if I came home crying because something hadn't gone my way, you better believe it, I was going to get yelled at. So what, she would say, move on. Is that the only toy in the room? Find another one. I know it sounds harsh in today's Disney way of parenting, but her approach did the job. It made me learn how to move on, which is what we need to do when we're rejected. Now, that doesn't mean that rejection doesn't hurt. It does. And I can't say that the hurt gets better with age or time, but the ability to move on does get better. And it's easier when it comes to professional rejection than personal rejection. So I think this consent movement that young people around the world are driving is wonderful. And in Nigeria, we have to take the concept and adjust it to our environment. Our problem here is not the enthusiastic yes. Our culture is all about saying yes. We are raised to respect authority, never disagree with elders or anyone in a position of power. Women are peacekeepers, so we say yes to everything to keep everyone happy. Our problem is not the enthusiastic yes. It's about giving and receiving the firm and committed no. So the consent movement in our country should talk about the enthusiastic yes, but we need to put more emphasis on giving and receiving the firm and committed no. And I'm not going to lie to you. There are consequences to giving a firm and committed no. You may not get that acting role. You may not get that job. You may lose that job. And ladies, you will be called a bitch, but you will be a bitch who said no. The Backstory is brought to you by E Media Productions. Production copyright 2021 E Media Productions. If you enjoyed this episode of The Backstory and want to hear more, subscribe to our 234 Audio YouTube channel. Episodes of this podcast can also be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. This episode of The Backstory was produced by Anthonieta Kalunta, Richard Anyebe, Rabia Hadejia, Alexandra Gekpe, John Iwodi, Dominic Tabakaji, and Sam Tabakaji. Executive producer Rahmat Muhammad. Special thanks to Joyce Short, founder of the Consent Network and author of Your Consent, The Key to Conquering Sexual Assault. We'll put a link to her TED Talk and to the Consent Awareness Network in our episode description. Also thanks to Malaiwa Gbado Ikaleku. I'm Rahmat Muhammad. See you next week.